The engine sputtered, coughed, and died, leaving only the hum of cicadas and my pounding heart to fill the silence. I was stranded in the middle of nowhere. New Mexico. With Ethan, my dad's best friend, whose piercing blue eyes had haunted my dreams since I was 16. Now, at 22, I was trapped with him in a broken-down truck, miles from civilization, and the secrets I'd buried were clawing their way to the surface. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as Ethan leaned under the hood of the old Chevy, his flannel shirt stretched tight across his broad shoulders. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the desert in hues of fire and shadow. We were supposed to be on a simple road trip, just me, Ethan, and a delivery of vintage car parts to a client in Arizona. Dad had insisted I go, saying it'd be good for me to get out of Chicago, to toughen up after a rough semester at college. He didn't know the real reason I'd been unraveling. I was gay, and I'd been in love with Ethan for years. Ethan slammed the hood shut, wiping sweat from his brow. "Radiator's shot," he said, his voice low and gravelly, like he'd smoked one too many cigarettes. "We're not going anywhere tonight." My stomach twisted. "What do we do?" He glanced at me, his gaze lingering a beat too long. "We wait. Tow truck won't be here till morning. Got a blanket in the back. We'll camp." Camp. With Ethan. Alone. My heart raced. A dangerous mix of fear and something else, something I'd spent years trying to suppress. I'd always known Ethan was off limits. He was 42. Dad's oldest friend. A former Marine who'd settled into a quiet life restoring cars. He was straight. Or so I thought. And I was just the kid he'd watched grow up. But the way he looked at me sometimes, like he saw right through my carefully constructed walls, made me question everything. We set up a makeshift camp by the truck, spreading a blanket on the cooling sand. The stars were brighter than I'd ever seen. A blanket of light above the endless desert. Ethan pulled a flask from his jacket and took a swig, offering it to me. I hesitated, then took it, our fingers brushing. The whiskey burned, but it was nothing compared to the heat of his touch. "You okay, Caleb?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost tender. "You've been quiet since we left Chicago." I swallowed hard, staring at the stars to avoid his eyes. "Just stressed. College. You know." He didn't buy it. I could feel it in the way he shifted closer, his knee brushing mine. "Talk to me. You used to tell me everything." That was true. As a kid, I'd idolized Ethan, trailing after him in Dad's garage, soaking up his stories of deployments and car restorations. He'd always been there, steady, kind, a rock when my world felt shaky. But I couldn't tell him this. I couldn't tell him that every time he smiled at me, it felt like a knife and a lifeline all at once. "I'm fine," I lied, handing the flask back. Our fingers touched again, and I swore he lingered this time. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken words. I wanted to scream, to confess, to run. Instead, I lay back on the blanket, staring at the sky, trying to ignore the warmth of him beside me. He lay down too, close enough that I could feel his breath, steady and calm, while mine was anything but. Ever feel like you're hiding something so big it's eating you alive? I blurted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Ethan turned his head, his face inches from mine. Yeah, he said quietly. I know what that's like. My heart stopped. Did he? Could he? No. It was impossible. But the way he looked at me, the way his voice dropped, made me wonder. I opened my mouth to say anything, but the words caught in my throat. Caleb, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But the risk was too great. If I told him, if I admitted I loved him, it could ruin everything me relationship with Dad, with Ethan, with the only family I'd ever known. So I stayed silent, letting the desert night swallow my secrets. But as we lay there, side by side, the air between us crackled with something new, something dangerous, something that felt like the start of everything or the end. The desert morning broke with a chill that seeped into my bones. But it was Ethan's absence that woke me. I sat up on the blanket, heart pounding, scanning the endless stretch of sand and scrub. His jacket was gone, his boots missing from beside the truck. For one gut-wrenching moment, I thought he'd left me. Then I saw him, a silhouette against the rising sun, standing on a low ridge, staring out at the horizon like he was searching for answers in the dust. I scrambled to my feet, brushing sand from my jeans, and called out, Ethan. He turned, his face unreadable, and waved me over. Just checking the view, he said as I reached him. But his voice was tight, like he was holding something back. The desert stretched out before us, vast and unforgiving, a mirror to the turmoil inside me. You scared me, I admitted, my breath visible in the cool air. Thought you bailed. He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Not my style. Caleb, you know that. Did I? I thought I knew everything about Ethan, his love for old cars, his quiet strength, the way he'd always been there for me. But last night, under the stars, something had shifted. His words, whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone, echoed in my head, tempting me to spill everything. I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. We packed up the blanket and waited for the tow truck, the silence between us heavier than the morning mist. When the truck finally arrived, a grizzled driver named Hank took one look at the Chevy and shook his head. Gonna take a couple days to fix this heap, he said, hooking up the tow. Nearest town's Gallup. Got a motel there if you're stuck. Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. Guess we're staying in Gallup. The ride to town was agonizing. Ethan and I were crammed in the back of Hank's tow truck, our shoulders brushing with every bump. I kept my eyes on the window, watching the desert blur by, but my mind was on Ethanon, the way his hand rested on his knee, inches from mine, on the way he'd looked at me last night, like he saw me for the first time. Gallup was a small, dusty town, all faded signs and sun-bleached buildings. The motel was a single-story relic with a flickering neon sign that read Desert Rose. Ethan booked a one room. Because, of course, it was cheaper and my heart did a somersault. 1 bed or 2. I didn't dare ask. The room had 2 beds. Thank God. But it was small. The air thick with the scent of old carpet and cheap air freshener. Ethan tossed his bag on one bed and collapsed onto it, rubbing his temples. This trip's gone to hell, he muttered. I forced a laugh, dropping my bag on the other bed. Could be worse. Could be raining. He shot me a look, half amused, half something else. You always do that. Do what? Make light of things, even when you're falling apart. My breath caught. He saw too much. Always had. I turned away, pretending to unpack. But my hands were shaking. I'm not falling apart. I lied. Ethan sat up. His eyes locked on me. Caleb, I've known you since you were 10. You think I can't tell when you're hurting? I froze, my back to him. The room felt smaller, the air thinner. I wanted to tell him God. I wanted to, but the words were a knot in my throat. Instead, I mumbled, just tired. Long night. He didn't push, but I could feel his gaze on me, heavy and searching. Get some rest, he said finally. We'll grab dinner later. Dinner was at a diner across the street. All chrome and red vinyl. The kind of place that hadn't changed since the 50s. We ordered burgers and fries. The silence between us broken only by the clink of plates and the hum of a jukebox playing Johnny Cash. Ethan was quieter than usual, his eyes distant, like he was wrestling with something too big to name. You ever think about leaving Chicago? He asked suddenly, his fork hovering over his plate. Starting over somewhere new. The question caught me off guard. Sometimes, I admitted. But Dad, he'd lose it if I left. Ethan nodded, like he understood more than I was saying. Your dad's a good man. But he's not you. You gotta live your life. Caleb. His words hit like a punch. Live my life. How could I? When the life I wanted was impossible. When the person I loved was sitting across from me. Untouchable. A world away. Back at the motel, the tension was unbearable. Ethan took a shower, and I sat on my bed, staring at my phone, trying to distract myself from the sound of water running, from the thought of him just beyond the thin bathroom door. When he emerged, shirtless, towel around his waist, I nearly dropped my phone. His chest was broad, scarred from his time in the Marines, and I couldn't look away. You okay? He asked, catching my stare. Yeah, I croaked, my face burning. Just zoned out. He smirked, pulling on a clean shirt, and I hated how easily he could unravel me. Get some sleep, kid, he said, climbing into his bed. Kid. The word stung, a reminder of the distance between us. I turned off the light, plunging the room into darkness. But sleep was impossible. I lay there, listening to Ethan's steady breathing, wondering if he'd ever know how much he meant to me or if I'd ever have the courage to tell him. The motel room was suffocating by morning, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on me. I woke to find Ethan already up, sitting on the edge of his bed, scrolling through his phone. His hair was mussed, his jaw shadowed with stubble, and the sight of him made my chest ache. I wanted to cross the room, to touch him, to tell him everything. But fear kept me rooted to the bed. Morning, he said, glancing up. His voice was rough, like he hadn't slept much either. Hank says the truck's still a day out. We're stuck here. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Great. Another day in paradise. He chuckled. But there was an edge to it. Something heavy and unspoken. Want to explore the town. Beats sitting here. Gallup wasn't much to explore, just a few shops. A gas station. And a coffee shop that smelled like burnt grounds and nostalgia. We ended up at a small park. A patch of green in the dusty sprawl. With a bench overlooking a dry creek bed. Ethan sat beside me. Close enough that our shoulders brushed. And I felt that familiar pull. That dangerous spark. You're different this trip, he said suddenly. His eyes on the horizon. Quieter. Like you're carrying the world. I stared at my hands. Picking at a hangnail. Just figuring things out. Like what? His voice was gentle, but it cut through me like a blade. I couldn't do this. Not here. Not now. But the words were clawing at me. Desperate to escape. Ethan. I started. My voice shaking. There's something I need to. My phone buzzed. Shattering the moment. It was Dad. Checking in. I answered. My heart sinking as his familiar voice filled the line. You boys okay? Truck giving you trouble? Yeah. We're fine, I said, forcing a smile into my voice. Just waiting on a fix. Good. Ethan's taking care of you. Right. I glanced at Ethan, who was watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Yeah. He's great. When I hung up, the moment was gone. Ethan stood, stretching. Let's grab some food. I'm starving. We ended up at a taco stand. The kind with plastic chairs and a menu scrawled on a chalkboard. The food was good. Spicy and warm. But I barely tasted it. Ethan was quieter now, too. His eyes darting to me when he thought I wasn't looking. I wanted to ask him what he was thinking. What he'd meant last night. But every time I opened my mouth, fear stopped me. Back at the motel, the tension was a living thing, coiling tighter with every glance, every brush of our hands. Ethan suggested a walk to clear our heads, and we ended up on a trail just outside town, the desert stretching out like an ocean of sand and stone. The sun was setting again, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. Caleb, Ethan said, stopping abruptly. His voice was low, urgent. What's going on with you? Really? I froze, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. The truth was right there, on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't say it. Instead, I turned away, staring at the horizon. It's nothing. Just college stuff. He stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat of him. Don't lie to me, he said, his voice rough with something I couldn't name. I see you. Caleb. I've always seen you. My breath hitched. What did that mean? Did he know? Had he always known? I turned to face him, and the look in his eyes, raw, unguarded, made my knees weak. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me. For a moment, I wanted him to. But he didn't. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair. We should head back, he said, his voice strained. It's getting dark. The walk back was silent, the air between us thick with what we hadn't said. Back in the motel room, I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment on the trail. I'd been so close to telling him, so close to shattering the walls I'd built. But what if I was wrong? What if he didn't feel the same? What if I lost him forever? Sleep didn't come. I listened to Ethan's breathing, steady and slow, and wondered how much longer I could keep this secret. How much longer I could pretend I didn't love him. As the night stretched on, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I'd tell him. Tomorrow, I'd be brave. But as I drifted into an uneasy sleep, a small voice in my head whispered that bravery might cost me everything. Morning light spilled through the motel's thin curtains, but it did nothing to warm the cold knot in my chest. I'd promised myself I'd tell Ethan today. But now, sitting across from him at the diner, sipping bitter coffee, the words felt impossible. He was reading a local paper, his brow furrowed, and I wondered if he was avoiding me as much as I was avoiding the truth. Hank called, he said, not looking up. Truck's almost ready. We'll be back on the road by noon. Relief and dread hit me at once. Back on the road meant less time alone with him. Less time to confess or to ruin everything. Good, I said, my voice flat. This place is starting to feel like a cage. He glanced up, his blue eyes sharp. You sure it's the place? My heart skipped. He was doing it again, seeing too much, cutting through my defenses. I looked away, focusing on the chipped mug in my hands. Yeah, just ready to move on. We packed in silence, the air between us heavy with unspoken questions. By noon, we were back in the Chevy, the engine humming like nothing had ever gone wrong. Ethan drove, his hands steady on the wheel, while I stared out the window, the desert blurring into a haze of sand and regret. We stopped at a gas station an hour out of Gallup, the kind with a single pump and a clerk who looked older than the mountains. Ethan went inside to pay, and I leaned against the truck, the sun warm on my face. I was running out of time. If I didn't tell him now, I might never. He came back with 2 sodas, tossing me one. You're quiet again, he said, leaning beside me. What's eating you? Caleb. This was it. My heart was a drum in my chest, loud and relentless. I took a deep breath, clutching the soda can like a lifeline. Ethan, I need to tell you something. Something big. His eyes locked on mine, steady and unyielding. I'm listening. The words were there, right there, but they stuck in my throat. I opened my mouth, closed it, then tried again. I'm gay. The world didn't end. The desert didn't swallow me whole. Ethan just stood there, his expression unreadable. And for a moment, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. Then he nodded, slow and deliberate. Okay. Okay. My voice cracked. That's it. He set his soda on the truck's hood, turning to face me fully. What do you want me to say? Caleb. That I'm surprised. I'm not. I've known for a while. My knees nearly gave out. You knew. He shrugged, a small, sad smile tugging at his lips. You're not as good at hiding as you think. I've seen the way you look at me. My face burned, shame and hope warring inside me. And you're okay with it. Caleb, he said, his voice low. You're you. That's all that matters. I wanted to cry, to scream, to hug him. But there was more. So much more. And I couldn't stop now. There's something else, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It's about you. His eyes darkened. A flicker of something fear. Maybe. Or longing crossing his face. Caleb. Don't. I love you. I blurted. The words tearing free like a dam breaking. I've loved you for years. Ethan. I know it's wrong. I know you're Dad's friend. I know you're straight. But I can't keep pretending it's not true. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan stared at me, his jaw tight, his hands clenched at his sides. I braced for rejection, for anger, for the end of everything. But he didn't yell. He didn't walk away. He just stood there, looking at me like I'd ripped his world apart. Caleb, he said finally, his voice raw. You don't know what you're saying. I do. I insisted, stepping closer. I've known for years. I can't keep it inside anymore. He shook his head, backing away. You're young. You're confused. I'm not what you think I am. My heart cracked, but I didn't back down. Then tell me what you are. Ethan. Because I see you. Too. I see the way you look at me. He flinched, like I'd struck him. And for a moment, I thought he might bolt. But he didn't. He just stood there, torn, his eyes searching mine for something I couldn't name. We need to get back on the road, he said finally, his voice hollow. He turned and climbed into the truck, leaving me standing there, my confession hanging in the air like dust. The drive was torture. Ethan didn't speak, didn't look at me. I stared out the window, my heart in pieces, wondering if I'd just destroyed everything. But deep down, a small, stubborn part of me refused to regret it. I told the truth. For the first time in years, I'd been honest. And no matter what happened next, that was something. The road stretched on, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the desert. But the distance between Ethan and me felt wider than the horizon. He drove with both hands on the wheel, his face a mask of stone, while I sat in the passenger seat, replaying my confession over and over. I told him I loved him, and he'd shut down, leaving me to drown in the silence. We stopped for the night at a motel outside Flagstaff, a step up from Gallup with clean sheets and a view of distant mountains. Ethan booked 2 rooms this time, and the gesture stung more than I expected. He was putting space between us, physical and emotional, and I didn't know how to bridge it. Dinner? He asked. His voice clipped as we dropped our bags in our respective rooms. Sure, I said, trying to sound normal, like I hadn't just bared my soul and gotten nothing in return. We ate at a roadside diner, the kind with greasy menus and waitresses who called you Han. Ethan barely touched his food, his eyes fixed on the table, and I couldn't stand it anymore. Ethan, I said, leaning forward, can we talk about it? He looked up, his eyes weary. Caleb, there's nothing to talk about. Bullshit, I snapped, louder than I meant. A few heads turned, but I didn't care. I told you I love you, and you're acting like it didn't happen. He leaned back, running a hand over his face. You're 22. I'm 42. You're my best friend's kid. What do you expect me to say? I expect you to be honest, I said, my voice shaking. You said you see me. So tell me what you see. He stared at me, his jaw working. And for a moment, I thought he might actually answer. But then he shook his head, pushing his plate away. This isn't a game. Caleb, you don't know what you're asking. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him feel the weight of what I'd carried for years. But I just sat there, my hands clenched under the table, as he stood and tossed some bills down. I'm going to bed, he said. We leave early. Back in my room, I paced like a caged animal, my mind racing. He hadn't denied it. He hadn't said he didn't feel something. But he hadn't said he did, either. I was stuck in limbo, caught between hope and heartbreak, and it was tearing me apart. I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I grabbed my jacket and slipped outside, needing air, needing space. The motel parking lot was quiet, the stars above as bright as they'd been that first night in the desert. I sat on the curb, head in my hands, trying to figure out what to do next. The door to Ethan's room opened, and he stepped out, his silhouette framed by the motel's neon glow. He saw me and hesitated, then walked over, sitting beside me on the curb. Neither of us spoke for a long time. I'm sorry, he said finally, his voice low. I didn't mean to hurt you. Then why are you shutting me out? I asked, my voice raw. I told you the truth. Ethan, I deserve yours. He looked at me, his eyes shadowed. It's not that simple. Then make it simple, I said, turning to face him. Tell me you don't feel anything. Tell me I'm imagining it. Tell me to let it go. He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his breath uneven, and I saw a crack in his armor, the flicker of something he'd been fighting to hide. My heart pounded as I leaned closer, close enough to feel the warmth of him, to smell the faint cedar of his cologne. Caleb, he whispered, his voice breaking. We can't. But he didn't pull away. His hand lifted, hovering near my face. And for one dizzying moment, I thought he might touch me. My breath caught, my whole body alive with the possibility of him. Then his hand dropped, and he stood, stepping back like I was fire and he was afraid of getting burned. Go to bed, he said, his voice rough. We've got a long drive tomorrow. He walked back to his room, leaving me on the curb, my heart racing with what could have been. I wanted to chase after him, to demand answers, but I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the stars, wondering how I'd survive loving someone who might never love me back. The road to Arizona was a blur of red rock and endless sky, but all I could see was Ethan's face last night, torn, vulnerable, so close to breaking. We barely spoke as we drove, the silence a wall between us. But every glance he stole in my direction felt like a confession he couldn't voice. I clung to that hope, fragile as it was, because letting go felt like losing myself. We reached Phoenix by afternoon, the city a sprawl of glass and heat. The client, a collector named Maria, was waiting at her garage, a sleek setup filled with vintage cars. Ethan slipped into work mode, All business as he handed over the parts and discussed specs. But I caught the way his eyes flicked to me, like he was checking if I was still there. Maria invited us to stay for dinner, and Ethan agreed, probably to delay being alone with me. Her house was warm, filled with the scent of roasted peppers and laughter from her kids running around. Over tacos and beer, Maria asked about our trip, and I let Ethan do most of the talking. My mind stuck on that moment on the curb. "You two seem close," Maria said, smiling as she refilled our glasses. "Like family." Ethan's jaw tightened, and I felt a pang in my chest. "Yeah," he said. His voice clipped. "Known Caleb since he was a kid." I stared at my plate, the word family cutting deeper than it should have. I wasn't his family. I didn't want to be. I wanted to be his everything. After dinner, we said our goodbyes and headed to a motel nearby. One room this time Ethan didn't ask, and I didn't argue. The air between us was electric as we settled in, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down. I couldn't take it anymore. "Ethan," I said, standing by the window, the city lights glinting outside. "We can't keep doing this, pretending nothing's changed." He sat on the bed, his elbows on his knees, head bowed. "Caleb, you're asking for something I can't give." "Why?" I demanded, turning to face him. "Because of Dad. Because of your age. Or because you don't feel it." He looked up, his eyes raw. "You think I don't feel it?" His voice was low, almost a growl. "You think I haven't spent every damn day of this trip trying not to?" He stopped, his breath ragged, and my heart leapt. "Trying not to what?" I pressed, stepping closer. "Say it, Ethan." He stood, closing the distance between us, his face inches from mine. "You're killing me, Caleb," he said, his voice breaking. "You're my best friend's son. You're young. You've got your whole life ahead of you. And I'm broken. I can't do this to you." "You're not broken," I said, my voice fierce. "And I'm not a kid anymore. I know what I want." His eyes searched mine, and I saw the war raging inside him, duty versus desire, fear versus truth. Then, slowly, impossibly, he reached out, his hand cupping my face. His thumb brushed my cheek, and I leaned into his touch, my whole body trembling. "Caleb," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "If we do this, there's no going back." "I don't want to go back," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I want you." For a moment, time stopped. Then he kissed me, his lips rough and desperate, like he'd been holding back for years. I kissed him back, pouring every ounce of my love, my fear, my hope into it. His hands gripped my waist, pulling me closer, and I felt alive, truly alive, for the first time. But then he pulled away, his forehead resting against mine, his breath uneven. "We can't," he said, his voice shattered. "Your dad, he'd never forgive me." "I don't care about Dad," I said, gripping his shirt. "I care about us." He shook his head, stepping back, his hands falling away. "There is no us, Caleb. There can't be." The words were a knife, slicing through me. I wanted to fight, to beg, but the look in his eyes, pain, guilt, love stopped me. He loved me. I knew it now, even if he couldn't say it. But he was choosing to walk away, and I didn't know how to stop him. I turned away, my eyes burning, and climbed into my bed, facing the wall. Ethan didn't say another word. The silence was louder than ever. And as I lay there, the weight of his kiss lingered, a promise and a wound all at once. The drive back to Chicago was a slow bleed, each mile pulling Ethan and me further apart. His kiss burned in my memory, a fleeting moment of truth that he'd buried under silence. He drove with his eyes fixed on the road, his hands gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. I wanted to scream, to make him talk, but I was afraid of what he'd say or what he wouldn't. We stopped for gas in Oklahoma, the air thick with humidity and unspoken words. I stayed in the truck, staring at my phone, pretending to scroll through messages. Ethan came back with coffee, setting a cup in the console without a word. It was such a small gesture, but it felt like a lifeline, a reminder that he still cared, even if he wouldn't admit it. "Caleb," he said finally, his voice low as we pulled back onto the highway. "I need you to understand something." My heart clenched. What? What happened? It was a mistake. His words were careful, measured, like he'd rehearsed them. I shouldn't have let it happen. I'm sorry. A mistake. The word hit like a punch, stealing my breath. "You don't mean that," I said, my voice shaking. "I felt it. Ethan, you kissed me back." He didn't look at me. "I'm not saying I didn't want to. I'm saying it can't happen again." "Why?" I demanded, turning to face him. "Because of Dad. Because you're scared. Or because you don't love me." He flinched, his hands tightening on the wheel. "It's not about love," he said, his voice raw. "It's about what's right. You deserve better than me. Caleb. Someone your age. Someone who can give you a future." "I don't want someone else," I said, tears burning my eyes. "I want you." He shook his head, his jaw tight. "You think you do? But you're young. You'll move on. You'll find someone who—" "Stop," I snapped, my voice breaking. "Stop telling me what I feel. I've loved you since I was 16. Ethan, that's not going away." He didn't answer, and the silence was worse than any rejection. We drove for hours, the tension a living thing between us, until we stopped at a rest area to stretch our legs. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the empty lot. I walked to the edge of the pavement, staring at the fields beyond, trying to hold myself together. Ethan followed, standing a few feet away. "I'm trying to protect you," he said quietly. "You don't know what this would do to you. To your dad. To us." "I don't need protecting," I said, turning to face him. "I need you to be honest. Do you love me or not?" He looked at me, his eyes raw with pain. "Caleb, I—" His phone rang, shattering the moment. It was Dad, and Ethan answered, his voice shifting to that easy, familiar tone he always used with him. I walked away, my chest tight. unable to listen to him pretend everything was fine. That night, we stayed at another motel. One room again, because Ethan said it was the last one available. I didn't believe him, but I didn't argue. We lay in our separate beds, the darkness heavy with what we couldn't say. I wanted to cross the room, to hold him, to make him see that we could figure this out together. But I didn't. I just lay there, listening to his breathing, wondering how I'd live without him. The next morning, we hit the road early, the miles ticking by in silence. I kept replaying his words, "It's not about love," and hating how they didn't feel true. He loved me. I'd seen it in his kiss, in his eyes, in the way he couldn't let me go completely. But he was choosing duty over us, and I didn't know how to change his mind. By the time we reached Chicago, I was a wreck, my heart bruised but still beating for him. We pulled into Dad's driveway, the familiar sight of home doing nothing to ease the ache. Dad came out, grinning, oblivious to the storm between us. "You boys survive?" he asked, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. "Barely," Ethan said, forcing a smile. He didn't look at me. I grabbed my bag, mumbling a goodbye, and headed inside, my chest tight with unshed tears. But as I reached the door, I heard Ethan's voice, low and urgent. "Caleb, wait." I turned, hope flaring despite everything. He stood by the truck, his eyes locked on mine, and for a moment, I thought he might say it had he loved me, that he'd fight for us. But he just shook his head, his voice barely a whisper. "Take care of yourself." And then he was gone, climbing back into the truck, driving away, leaving me with a heart full of what-ifs and a love I didn't know how to let go. Chicago felt colder without Ethan. The city's gray skyline a stark contrast to the desert's endless stars. I went through the motions college. Work. Pretending everything was fine, but inside, I was unraveling. His kiss. His words. The way he'd walked away, they haunted me. A constant ache I couldn't shake. Dad noticed something was off, but I brushed him off with excuses about school stress. How could I tell him the truth? That I'd fallen for his best friend. That we'd crossed a line. That Ethan had broken my heart to protect us both. I couldn't. So I buried it. Just like I'd buried my feelings for years. Weeks passed, and Ethan didn't call. Didn't text. I saw him once. At Dad's garage, working on a Mustang with that same focused intensity. He glanced at me, his eyes flickering with something regret. Maybe. Or longing, but he turned away. And I didn't push. I was done chasing someone who wouldn't choose me. But late one night, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. A single text, "Can we talk?" My heart raced as I typed back. "Where?" "Garage." Now. I shouldn't have gone. I knew it. But I grabbed my jacket and drove to Dad's garage. The streets quiet under the city's glow. Ethan was there, leaning against the workbench, a bottle of whiskey in his hand. He looked tired, older, like the weight of our secret had aged him. "You came," he said, his voice rough. "You asked," I said, crossing my arms. "What do you want?" "Ethan." He set the bottle down, stepping closer. "I've been trying to do the right thing, to stay away. But I can't stop thinking about you." My breath caught. Hope and hurt colliding. You made it pretty clear there's no us. I lied, he said, his voice breaking. I lied to you. To myself. To your dad. I love you. Caleb. I've loved you for longer than I should have. The words were everything I'd wanted. But they came with a sting. Then why push me away? I asked, my voice shaking. Why let me think I was alone in this? Because I'm terrified, he admitted, his eyes raw. Of what this means. Of what it'll do to your dad. To you. I'm twice your age. Caleb. I've got baggage me past. My time in the Marines. You deserve someone who can give you everything. I don't want everything, I said, stepping closer. I want you. He looked at me, torn, and I saw the moment he broke. He closed the distance, his hands framing my face, and kissed me, slow and deep, like he was pouring his soul into it. I kissed him back, my hands gripping his shirt, afraid he'd slip away again. We can't tell your dad, he said when we pulled apart, his forehead against mine. Not yet. He'd never understand. I know, I said, my heart heavy but full. But we'll figure it out. Together. He nodded, a small smile breaking through. Together. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Dad. The age gap. The secrets they'd all test us. But as I stood there, wrapped in Ethan's arms, I felt something I hadn't in years, hope. Love wasn't a mistake, no matter how hard it was. It was a truth worth fighting for. We spent the night in the garage, talking, laughing, stealing kisses in the shadows of old cars. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And as dawn broke, painting the city in gold, I knew I'd never regret this loving him, choosing him, no matter what came next. Because sometimes, the hardest journeys lead to the truest homes. And Ethan, with all his scars and fears, was mine.